Live shopping isn't just a trend, it's the retail revolution, and Spree is leading the way. We're here to show businesses the magic of using video and social media to skyrocket sales and expand their audience. At Spree, we're all about making your sales savvy and your connections rock solid. So let's dive in and make your retail dreams come true. Hey everybody, my name is Corey Morris and I'm the CMO here at Spree, and welcome to today's Expert Talk. So as many of you all know, getting your organization to embrace any form of change can be incredibly difficult, right? So that's particularly true when it comes to new forms of technology, such as what we do here at Spree, namely live shopping. And that is also why we're excited to be joined by someone who can help us all understand how to make that shift from not really now to let's go. Oliver Banks, welcome to the show, my friend. Where does this conversation find you today?
Hey, Corey. Well, it's amazing to be here with you. I'm really excited, and thank you for having me. I'm coming from just outside London, UK.
Awesome. Great. And I'm wearing my new Spree t-shirt. We just got them the other day.
Amazing.
Nice little design.
Look at
from
that.
Our in-house design team.
Oh, I love that. I need a close-up later on.
Like, you gotta wear your new Spree shirt.
I've got my lovely white shirt.
We'll get one in the mail to you.
Yeah.
We'll get one in the mail to you as quickly as possible. So let's light this candle. I think we should. So to start us off, Oliver, why don't you share a little bit about your background, in particular, how you've helped organizations kind of embrace transformative tech, and in particular, why the change journey matters just as much as the technology itself.
Sure. So, I'm a retail transformation specialist, and I work with retailers on complex changes. And a lot of the challenges you've already described and will continue to explore through today's session are so prevalent across so many different retail companies. My first big steps into retail was working with Tesco and, really seeing how that operating model worked, but more importantly, how their change operating model worked. Tesco were and are incredible at change. They're continually evolving, continually improving and tweaking and optimizing different aspects. And so this was a fantastic learning ground for me. And I've since gone on, and now as a consultant, I work with many different retailers, looking at that bridge between the gap between the ambition, the goal that you have, and the execution, actually making that change happen. And, there are many, many different facets to this, which, I'd love to explore. But we have to remember and recognize that in the world of retail that we're in right now, change is ever present and it's continuing to accelerate. We're facing disruption on all sides. And unfortunately, we've seen, of course, many great companies fall by the wayside as well. Retailers now have got to face into the recognition that we've got evolving and continually changing consumer habits and shopping behaviors, an ever shifting channel mix, fierce competition, razor thin margins, all sorts of market volatility and supply chain issues. There seems to be something new and evolving pretty much every single week, right? And so right now we're in a place where transformation isn't optional. It's not something that we choose to do. It's something we have to do. It's a way of life in modern retail, I would suggest.
Well, what's the old adage, though? The only constant is change, right?
Exactly. And it's funny, phrases like that, we kind of throw them around. There are lots of different ones, retailers, detail, and customers always right. There's lots of phrases like that we throw around, but whilst they seem funny on the face of it, actually there's a lot of truth in them, and that's, I guess, why they've come up to be popular sayings over time.
So you cut your teeth with Tesco, correct?
Yep.
And then you kind of taken on the role of consultancy. Just before we dig into it, what do you think the biggest fear is when it comes to organizations really going from, that sounds like a great idea, to, holy heavens, how in the hell are we going to do this?
Well, I think fear is a really important word, and there's lots of different dynamics here going on, both for the organization as a whole, but also for the individuals involved. And there's two primary fears that are going on, again, between both of those spheres. And I appreciate, when you're looking at particularly individuals, there's lots of different facets there. But you've got the fear of the unknown and fear of failure are the two big ones. And
right.
Many of these are born out of our prehistoric selves, our sort of primal brain, and how our primal brain developed from being cave people, where we're thinking about literally life and death every single day as we go out hunting for berries or fish or whatever, and how our brain evolved to keep us safe and ultimately develop and evolve into where we are today. But how that works means that it affects our behavior today when we're sitting in the relative safety of a meeting room, So, as we're thinking about stress or potential conflict, there are chemical changes going on in our heads individually, and I would suggest in the sort of the corporate head, if that makes sense, that actually shut down some of our thinking. It's really fascinating. And you look at the sort of the neuroscience behind it, it shuts down the smart part of our brain that is great at considering different options and deciding and logic. It literally shuts that down so it can't process thinking when we're needing it the most. It's quite outrageous in a way how the human psyche is developed. But as we're thinking about that, like I say, coming back to fear of failure, fear of the unknown, those two elements are really vital in how we're embracing change. And change, by definition, has both of those facets right in it. We don't know what's coming. As much as we can communicate, as much as we can set expectations, there is still that nagging feeling of doubt or vagueness or uncertainty. And then fear of failure is, well, what if we're playing with fire, so to speak, however safe it feels like, what if it all goes wrong? What if we find ourselves subject to market volatility? What if our competitors take it away? What if it burns our thin margins already?
That fear you're talking about, let's unpack that a little bit. Is that fear for organizational consequences, or is that personal consequences, or is it a combination of both?
It's both, right? If we're thinking about the organization, there's a natural reluctance to lose what you have already, right? Even in fast growth stages, yes, I'm interested in getting that next stage of growth, that next, percent of market share, whatever that is. But once you're sort of you're mature, again, it's a real look at actually how do we maintain that market share? How do we prevent ourselves falling back? And we've seen that time and time again. When you've got this sort of behemoth in the market, how do they protect that market share? Because every week or every quarter or every year, whenever that sort of industry insight comes out around how the market's shifting, everyone in that company is looking at those percentages. How are we doing versus our competitors?
Yep.
And by the way, I think the competitive spirit in retail is fantastic and it's really vital, but it can be dangerous because we take our eye off the ball as well. But as an individual as well, we could be feeling fear. What if I lose my job? What if people think badly of me? What if, there are some hidden elements here? What if I'm found out that I don't know as much as perhaps people expect me to know? There's lots of challenges going on here.
Yeah.
And that psychology, it fascinates me because there's so much going on. Each individual, each company is different as well. But that's not to say we shouldn't do change, of course.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And let's dig into that a little bit more, because I want to get a little bit more into the problem, if you will. So we've talked about some of these already, but in your experience, what do you think are the most common internal roadblocks? We've talked a little bit about fear, and that could be at an organizational level, or that can also be at a individual level. But what are some of the other internal roadblocks that maybe keep companies stuck in this "I like the idea, but not now" mindset? And how have, let's talk a little bit about some concrete examples. Well, how have some successful teams, through your experience and through the work that you've done, broken through them?
So let's just face the elephant in the room here. It's not the right time right now, and it never will be. There's
So you're
always a
saying
reason.
people say, yeah, let's wait, the time's not right for this, right? Yeah.
Right, but when is going to be the right time? We look at the market.
I said that about fatherhood. I said that about marriage. I said that about everything.
Thanks for sharing, Corey. But
I got more. Just keep asking.
No, there's so much going on all the time. Look at the world that we live in today. It feels like we're just about to get this level of stability, and then something else happens.
Right.
And to the point you made earlier, change is the only constant. So we have to also expect that in the volatile market that we face today. And VUCA is that acronym that I love: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That perfectly describes the world of retail, but to a bigger sense, the world of business and the entire lifestyle. It describes it so perfectly today, and it recognizes that we can't wait for that perfect time. There is no perfect time, because it's ever evolving. And so there are lots of reasons why actually you might decide right now is not the perfect time, rightfully or wrongfully. You might be thinking about organizational overwhelm, or team overwhelm, or even individual overwhelm. You might be thinking about maybe capability within the organization. You might be thinking about various legacy systems and the challenges that they all bring, and you think, oh, well, we can't do it because of system X or system Y, it won't let us, etc. You might also just have a very full change agenda going on right now, and you might be making the intentional decision to say, too much, we have to stop somewhere, and that's okay, and we can perhaps come back to that.
Right.
And then the other factor is, when you're facing adverse performance, it's very easy to think, well, actually, you know what? We're facing challenging like for likes or year-on-year performance numbers. We've got to report to shareholders in, X months' time about how our performance is going. We can't rock the boat right now. But the challenge is, if you keep doing what you are doing at the moment, is that going to be the breakthrough that really shifts that future? There is that, again, that saying, you keep, I'm going to muck it up now, you see, keep doing what you're doing, you keep getting what you're getting, right?
Right.
I think it was maybe Albert Einstein. But actually, how do you add in that step change? How do you change the momentum that your organization is building towards right now?
Well, that's a great question, because so teams who've managed to get through all these internal barriers, if you will, how have they done it?
So there's a couple of elements. Firstly, around action and agility. They're the two parts. So let's take action. Change only happens with work, right? And there's
Right.
This has to happen. We have to do things. It doesn't just instantly turn. We can't just click our fingers and everything magically works, right?
That'd be nice.
Unfortunately. As much as the world of AI may promise that, it's not quite come true just yet. But, we can make ourselves very busy and give us our feeling of we're taking action. But actually, is it really action that drives us forward? Is it action that shows progress week over week, or month over month, or year over year? And it's very easy, like I say, to fall into that trap of thinking that you're taking action. But actually, what's the next best action you should take at any given moment in time? And being really open and honest with that is really important. And then the second piece I wanted to explore was agility. Now, the great companies that I've worked with are all very agile. And I mean that in the agile in the small sense, not necessarily working to agile principles with a capital A, but they're dynamic. They're keen to learn. They're keen to flex and run experiments. Test and learn is such a vital mindset, which, again, there's lots of retailers that talk about test and learn, and that's fantastic. But are you really taking on true tests that push your boundary of understanding, push what you think is possible or not? And it's okay that failure happens. It's okay that you try something and it doesn't work as expected or as hoped. And you can revert back and try something else. And so I think it's very important to be agile in that sense. And, you know, as we're talking earlier, thinking about adverse performance, for example, actually that adverse performance, how much of that has happened because we weren't doing agile thinking, you know, a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, and trying out where could we take this going forward? I think it's absolutely vital that even if you're in that challenged position, you're still pushing the boundary, you're still trying new things, because that's ultimately what's going to unlock the next stage of growth or business development.
Where does the willingness to take on new risk in an experimental phase, I mean, that must play into this as well, right? Because, you know, as the saying also, I mean, we're all about sayings here today. So no risk, no reward, right? So I guess as a part of that agility framework, you also have to be willing to accept that some of your experiments, if you will, are going to end in failure. Or as I've also heard some people say, you're either winning or you're learning. We don't really consider them to be failures. They're just a way for us to grow and learn. How does that fit into this framework that you're seeing?
So I think it's such a fascinating topic here, right? We've really got to start thinking about two things: the culture of the organization and how willing that culture is to adopt and react and evolve to change. It's very easy to, you know, keeping on the sayings theme. You know, that's not how it works around here, right? It's very easy to put those physical barriers up and stop progress, stop conversations, find a reason not to do something new. So culture is really important, but the organizational appetite, which is very closely linked, is also vital to consider, because if that organization, and that's everything from the leaders at every level down, if we're not really willing to accept a change, if we're not really going to go all the way, is it actually a closed door before we've even started testing and learning? For example, you know, if we're thinking about let's throw an example. If we're thinking about a new business model that we've been thinking about conceptualizing, if there is zero appetite in the organization to really follow through and actually say, do you know what, we're going to diversify from our core business model of today, then that is a huge challenge. And no matter how incredible the results of any sort of test and learn phase are going to be, you're going to find this appetite, like I say, at every level of the organization, pushing back and saying, do you know what, no, thank you. And I think if you need to work out, how do I assess what that appetite truly is?
I think that's a great metaphor, your appetite for change, and how hungry are you really, and where does that actually sit in the organization? Is it a top-down thing in which it filters down? Is it a middle management thing? Is it a bottom up? And it really kind of, you know, we're talking to retailers today, e-commerce retailers, and actually look in your organization and kind of figure out where you're agents for change and who has ownership for that. I think that's incredibly interesting. If it's okay, I'd like to shift gears a little bit, just in the interest of time, because I want to talk a little bit about transforming mindsets with new tech. So as you know, you mentioned earlier, you know, we have AI. Everybody's talking about AI. We're obviously working with another type of new tech, which is live shopping. So which emerging technologies are you seeing? Because you're obviously, you're knee deep in the retail world each and every day. You're talking to lots of these different companies. So what type of emerging technologies are you seeing, Oliver, deliver, let's just say, the biggest upside for retailers today? And if you could also talk about why, that would be helpful.
So let's just face into AI for a moment, because
We have to. I mean, it's a part of every conversation today. So.
it really is. And AI is like a solution. It's very, in my view, it's quite unusual, because AI is not one thing. It's many different things. And we're
Agreed.
coming to this like AI is a new technology. AI has been around for years and years, decades, right? Coming up for nearly 100 years old, actually, in the not too distant future, which is quite fascinating when you start to really think about it, because really what's happened is ChatGPT and OpenAI, which came onto the scene, I think it was about 2022, suddenly exploded this concept of artificial intelligence and brought it into people's minds to think, well, actually, this is really incredible. I can, speak to a computer. But actually, AI is already deeply embedded in the world of retail. We're using AI invisibly in so many different places. And so there's a huge opportunity, and we're already partway down that journey as well. So it's very difficult. So there's lots of different parts of AI, lots of different types of AI, for example, use cases across the organization. So I don't want to dive into those too much, if I'm honest. But what I do want to think about is channels.
I want to touch on that a little bit more. You've piqued my interest. You said that the retail world has been using AI for a very long time. Can you spotlight a few examples for people listening in today, other than ChatGPT, of course?
Yeah, well, I think actually ChatGPT has got a long way to go in terms of how it could help retailers. But let's start thinking about ordering systems. Retail works through that stock flow, and the best retailers have got fantastic stock systems that are based off essentially forecasts, and our sales forecasts, our orders, and how we can bring in the stock. How do we match that off? And so at a very basic level, learning about those forecasts, how do I bring in the stock? How do I match it? How do I improve forecasts? That's a perfect use of AI. And again, like I say, many different facets that you can start building more and more intelligence into these discussions over time. Pricing is another great one, which, again, traditionally, we would have a pricing model that might be, a cost plus. So what are we buying it at? What are we going to use as a margin uplift on top of that? We might be thinking about competitive pricing, and suddenly starting to use things like web scraping, which could allow us to be a bit more intelligent or dynamic with how we're doing that. But actually, when you start to think about how AI can impact pricing, there are so many other facets that go into that. We can bring in stock, for example. We can bring in customer preferences. We can bring in online insights. We can bring in market trends. We can bring in everything from, weather, demand, all sorts of different aspects here that can fit into pricing. So again, another perfect example of how AI is already playing huge parts. And those elements are really data rich. They work on numbers, they work on logic, and that's perfect use case for AI in my view. The other aspect is the more generative side of AI. Again, I'm being very broad here with my my cutting up of the AI market. But if you look at e-commerce, we work on words and pictures up to now in the majority of e-commerce use cases. And I think, we've seen some great examples of like Amazon, for example, deploying technology to help their sellers turn a standard product picture or even a computer generated product picture into more lifestyle photography shots.
Right.
Fascinating use of AI. Obviously, product descriptions work perfectly with a tool like ChatGPT, where you can just start saying, like, here's my feature set, bosh, here's 100,000 descriptions. Great, marvelous. And by the way, I'd like them in 100 different languages. Bosh. Okay, great, fantastic. So I think there's some really interesting use cases there. And of course, then you start to think about, well, how is AI evolving? And you start to think about video as a concept. And there's some fascinating experiments, particularly out in Asia and China, around how video is being used to help drive retail forward.
So when you're pitching a new tech initiative, let's just say it doesn't have to be AI, it could be anything from machine learning, live shopping, something else. How do you, as a consultant today, what's your toolbox looks like, or what does your toolbox look like? What I was trying to say, when you're trying to align leadership, cross-functional teams, basically anyone around a clear kind of custom-centric value proposition, how do you go about that?
Well, the first starting position is to not think about the technology. It's to think about the why. What's the problem? What are we really trying to do here? And the technology might be one way of solving that problem. There are probably many different ways, and you then have to decide, well, which way is most appropriate for us at this moment in time. And so how do you take that real understanding of the problem? Well,
I think we have a bit of lag.
What's really going on? Where are the mirror? And reading the signals. Okay, can you hear me? You got me?
That's okay. Let's just wait. I think we have a bit of. Yeah, we can hear you now. Maybe you want to just start that sentence over again. Sorry.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure people get this.
So start right from the top of this answer.
Yeah, that's fine. Just go for it. Yeah, just continue that stream of thought. That's fine.
So really, we need to start with thinking about why. What's the problem or the opportunity that we need to be facing into? And the technology may or may not be the appropriate answer to that particular challenge that you have in front of you. In fact, there's probably lots of different options, and you need to decide which is the right answer for us, given our current situation, given everything else in the market, etc. So understanding why starts with a couple of different elements. Firstly, taking an honest look in the mirror. What's really happening in the organization? How is your business currently performing? What are customers feeling? What are customers experiencing? What are colleagues feeling and experiencing as well? How do you really take a very honest view, as I say, at that organization? It's very easy to sugarcoat things. It's very easy to fall prey to the curse of knowledge, where you think you know what's happening because perhaps you've worked for the company for many, many years. Perhaps you've done the job before, whatever that is. You think, but you don't know. So really take an honest look in the mirror and then read the signals. What is the data telling us about how we're doing? That might be qualitative or quantitative data, so numbers or words, essentially, that perhaps you can bring in your customer insights here. Perhaps you can bring in market trends. Perhaps you can bring in performance numbers or other sort of data and analytics from within the company. So how are you going to take an honest look in the mirror? How are you going to read the signals that are in front of you and then decide, well, how do we proceed from here? What is going to be the right type of transformation? And that technology may or may not be the right answer for you, as I say.
Let's just say there's a lot of people on the fence right now about, I think a lot of people watching this today are on the fence about live shopping. They've seen it. They've seen other customers use it. They've seen some of the outputs there. If they were interested in kind of, let's just say that they're bought in on it, but they're trying to figure out how they can get the rest of the organization bought in on it as well. What are some of the levers that they can use to make that happen?
I lost you a bit there, Corey, but I think the question was, how do we get live stream shopping going? Is that right?
Yeah. So the question was basically, there's a lot of people watching today. Maybe they're on the fence about live shopping. They're not really sure how they're going to implement it in their organization. I think we can all all agree that live shopping being what it is and where it is, there's not a lot of organizations that maybe have a department of live shopping. So it's like, where does it fit across our marketing team, our sales team, our e-com team? But they're on the fence and they're trying to figure out, how do we kind of embrace this change to set our teams and our overall organization up for success. If you were to address these people directly right now, and obviously we can't dig into it, they can always reach out to you later for more inspiration, but at a high level, where do you think these people should really start?
So firstly, live stream shopping and live shopping is such a fascinating area right now, and it's a huge growth potential, both from a consumer spending more time doing live shopping experiences than ever before, and insights and intel suggests there's a lot of room for growth going forward as well. But companies are seeing more and more results as well. I think if we reflect back earlier in the conversation, we're talking about there's never a right time, and I think that's so true with live stream shopping. You can find a reason not to go after that right now. And that may or may not be true. But what's also exciting is the tools that we have available mean it's easier than ever to start experimenting, to start learning. And it's, this is not a done once and it's sort of instantly there, right? As with any change, we need to learn, we need to expose ourselves to, well, this works, this doesn't work. Okay, so we're going to shift our direction. And it's such a fascinating area. I remember when I first got into live stream videos for sort of webinars and so on, it's just such an easy platform to start shifting your direction in, because, it's not like you've got, a large store estate. It's not like you have to deal with all sorts of stock flow or supply chain issues. You can be so agile, to that word that we were talking about earlier, so agile with this sector that actually, do you know what? What have we got to lose? We're not making large investments. We're not going to consume tons of time. There's very little resource actually that we do need to make this happen. What's the art of the possible? And how can we better support our customers with their passions? So obviously, depending on what sort of retailer you are, that's going to be very different. But every single retailer can lean into customer passions, and there's a ton of value that can be delivered through that sort of bringing together of content, community, and commerce. And I think if we bring those together, what's the art of the possible? And I think that is a really important question to lean into.
It's the triple C. It's
That's
the triple C effect. Absolutely. So, Oliver, where can people find you? Where can they read more about you?
So I'm probably easiest to find on LinkedIn. So I'm Oliver Banks. And if they're interested in reading more about me, then perhaps my book, Driving Retail Transformation, How to Navigate Disruption and Change, would be a great start, where we explore all sorts of different elements. There's a framework in there called the Retail Transformation Steering Wheel that can guide you through every step of how do I make change happen.
Wonderful. Yeah, I suggest everybody to check that book out. So, Oliver, a huge pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. And thanks to everyone else for joining. And look, I just want to say, if you're all looking for more ways to kind of introduce live shopping to your company, then rewatch this, and then also check out all the helpful resources that we have at Spree. That's sprii.io. We're also on LinkedIn. We're on YouTube and Spotify. So feel free to follow us there. And if you are on the fence right now, folks, and if you want to talk to one of our many talented live shopping specialists to see if Spree and live shopping is a good match for you, then feel free to book a meeting directly from our website. Once again, thanks to all of you for joining, and see you next time.
Thanks so much, Corey. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.